Camden stared at her phone, her thumb hovering over the delete button. Another draft notice. She couldn't bear to read it, couldn't stomach the thought of being shipped off to fight in a war she didn't believe in. Well, I'm not going, so fuck it, she muttered, tossing her phone into the kitchen table. Her mother, Margaret, looked up from her table with a pained expression. You say so, but we can't escape. Says who? Camden challenged. Says the government, Margaret replied, her voice heavy with resignation. The government can go fuck itself, Camden spat. Margaret sighed. Well, you saying that doesn't make it any less likely that you're going to escape this. Just then, Rob, Camden's father, entered the kitchen, catching the tail end of their conversation. Escape what? He asked, his brows furrowed. Margaret gestured towards their daughter. Your daughter thinks she can dodge the draft. Rob let out a humorless laugh. I don't understand. This is the equality that you asked for. About time this nonsense came to an end. In my day, only men were drafted. Dad, no one should have to go, Camden cried, her eyes flashing with anger. This country is corrupt. The conversation spiraled, with the parents desperately grasping at straws, mental health exemptions, fleeing to Canada or Mexico, even resorting to contact old flames for help. But every avenue seemed blocked, every escape route cut off. Later that night, Rob and Margaret lay in bed, the weight of their daughter's future pressing down on them. Something tells me we taught this machine, Robert mused, his voice tinged with regret. We weren't complicit during the Vietnam War, but we did not hold our ground. Margaret turned to face him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Rob, Cam is depending on us. Rob hesitated before speaking again. Tim says there's a group forming. Margaret nodded slowly. Jen says the same thing. The group Tim is talking about, it's hardcore, Rob warned. Yeah, Jen knows because her brother refuses to send his daughter, Margaret replied, a hint of hope creeping into her voice. Rob turned over in bed, his voice barely above a whisper. Well, do we have any other option? The silence that followed was deafening. In the days that followed, the family found themselves turning more and more to the alternative news sources. The Foundry hosted a slew of journalists they started following months ago. They had been the only one to warn about the draft before it happened. Now their reporting on the war and the growing resistance movement became a lifeline for the desperate. Camden spent hours poring over the Foundry's articles, finding solace in the anti-war voices they platformed. She learned of underground networks helping draft dodgers, of peaceful protests turning violent as tensions with law enforcement escalated. The risks were immense, but the alternative, being forced to fight in a war she opposed, seemed unthinkable. As the deadline for Camden's deployment loomed, the family huddled around their kitchen table. The Foundry's latest report illuminated on their tablet screen. They had a decision to make, one that could change their lives forever. Trust in the system had eroded, replaced by a desperate hope in the underground movement that promised a way out. Rob looked at his wife and his daughter, his jaw set with determination. We'll look into it, Cam, he said, echoing his earlier promise. But this time they all knew that looking into it meant something far more dangerous and potentially liberating than they ever imagined. The war raged on, faceless enemies conjured by propaganda they no longer believed, but for the moment, the battle was here at home, a fight for Camden's future, for their family's integrity, and for the hope that somewhere, somehow, this senseless conflict would end.